Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 3 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. We are here at a special time with a very special book. We are going to be talking about Splinter Effect by Andrew Ludington. So do not move from that chair. This book is terrific. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 novels of suspense. My current book is One Wrong Word. You see the cover behind me. My brand new book coming up is called All This Could Be Yours, and it comes out on September the 9th. And I've told you how to remember when it's coming out, right? It's the same day, lucky me, as Dan Brown's new book. So when you hear about Dan Brown's book coming out, you say, oh, I know what that day is. It's September 9th, the same day my friend Hank Phillippi Ryan's book, All This Could Be Yours, comes out. That is my marketing, and I'm sticking with it. But this is not the book. The book we're talking about today is Splinter Effect by the fabulous Andrew Ludington. It is smart. It is cool. It is clever. You have never read a book like this. I'm a massive time travel fan, and time travel is difficult. We'll talk about that because you have to have rules and they have to work. And Andrew Ludington has done it absolutely fabulously. So we are so pleased that Andrew is here today, and so pleased that you all are here today. I see Deborah Press and Shannon Hansen. Thank you so much. The gang is arriving to talk about Splinter Effect, and we will do that in a minute. This came out last week, Andrew. Congratulations. Your debut novel.
Thank you.
So what did you think about your debut and the whole thing? And here's your book that you've been working on for however long. There it was. Tell me about that. Tell us about that.
You know, with all of the work that goes into it as well, not just the release of one book, of course, as those of you who are familiar with this process go, you're promoting one book, you're writing another book, editing another book. And it's a lot of action that's going on, and then suddenly you have hardcovers in your hand. It really is not sunk in for me. We had a launch event, and some lovely people came, and it was a lot of fun. But it does not yet feel like it's really out there in the world. So I'm waiting for that to sink in.
Yeah, I mean, have you always wanted to write? Has this been a dream?
I think I've always wanted to be a storyteller. And I wrote screenplays when I was a younger person and sold a couple of screenplays in my 20s. But it didn't really occur to me to try my hand at writing a novel until right around the pandemic.
And when the screenplays, let me just rewind for a second. That's so interesting. I didn't know that you wrote screenplays. The same genre, time travel-y screenplays. Hey, Kathy Lanigan, happy Crime Time Tuesday to you too. Time travel kinds of screenplays, or what kind were they?
Not time travel. The first screenplay that I wrote, which I wrote with a friend of mine named Justin Bondi. If you're out there somewhere, Justin, hello. He and I wrote a screenplay which was about it was called, and now I'm going to blank on the name, but Shell Game. The screenplay was called Shell Game, and it was about the technology existing for someone to copy all of your memories into somebody else's brain.
Oh.
So there was a very active black market for young, healthy bodies upon which to write your aging, very wealthy memories. And the main character is a procurer of bodies who finds himself in a moral quandary over it.
I love your brain because it's expanding the possibilities of what we understand or think we know about how not only how the brain works, but how time works and how physics works and what's possible. I mean, when we think about all the things that 100 years ago that we would never have thought could possibly be, and how, that's just ordinary now. That's how our lives are now. Since you were a little kid, did you have an imagination about how the world might be and what might happen and how we all might change?
Oh yeah, all the time. I got into when we were single digits, my sister and I would make all of the other kids in the neighborhood basically act out these scenarios that we would develop, where everyone had a character, and we'd all sort of collaboratively role play these stories. And from there, I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and I started creating these adventures for all of my friends to go through. So yeah, I'd say I have always been curious about the what if, and once that what if gets stuck in my head, I just can't help but start building around that concept.
I love that. I love the what if concept. And definitely we'll talk about that in about 2 minutes when we begin our interview about Splinter Effect by Andrew Ludington. If you are new to Crime Time, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have picked an absolutely marvelous day to be here. Shannon Hansen is here. She is a veteran. She has been here from the beginning. And Andrew Ball is here. Robin Stell is quoting me, I love your brain. Jerry Manis says, love the idea of a time-traveling Indiana Jones. This needs to be a movie series. Jerry, you are so wise. We will talk about that because it is incredibly cinematic, and more about that in a minute. And Kathy Graham says, very happy to hear that more books are coming. And we'll talk about that too. Sharon is also here from Minnesota. Renee says there's feedback coming from your end, but I don't hear any feedback. Renee, maybe go in and come out and see if it goes away. If everybody else can hear fine, right? I can hear fine. Seems to be fine. Thank you, Renee. We appreciate that. Let me quickly tell you about Andrew Ludington. Andrew Ludington writes transportive adventure stories intended to make you forget your commute. I love that. He graduated from Kenyon College with a BA in English literature and lives in Evanston, Illinois, where he moonlights as a technologist for Northwestern University. Splinter Effect is his first novel. He is also, I don't really know whether I should reveal this to you. He is also an award-winning athlete, and he doesn't really talk about that much. Can you reveal to us, if you can, the awards that you've won as an athlete?
I don't really like to talk about this publicly because of the, I like to keep humble around these topics, but I will say just this once that I was on the second place T-ball team, 1977, Central Michigan. And we could have been first if I could have pitched or hit, fielded. Probably we wouldn't have been. We probably still would have been second, but
they probably retired your jersey, didn't they?
Probably, yeah, as a bad luck charm. Yeah.
I love that. I honestly can picture you playing T-ball. It's really cute, and I'm glad that you turned to writing, just to give everybody else a chance at T-ball. Really, that's
Thank you.
So tell us about this book. Tell us about the Splinter Effect. What is the idea, and what was the germ of it?
So the hook in Splinter Effect is that it starts in 2018 in a world indistinguishable from our own, with the notable exception that time travel was invented right around the turn of the century. So the main character, Dr. Robert Ward, who everyone knows by his nickname Rabbit. Rabbit is a chronoarchaeologist, the first of his job. He works for the Smithsonian Institution, and he goes on short missions to the mostly in the classical Mediterranean, where he finds, steals, and hides precious artifacts for excavation in the present when he returns. And Rabbit is great at his job. He speaks 6 ancient languages. He can blend into ancient societies, but recently, 2 of his last jobs he's been robbed, and word is getting out, and it is damaging his reputation. So when information comes out that an object which he did not secure 20 years previously has been discovered again in the past, he agrees to go on a mission to 6th century Constantinople to retrieve it.
It's such a good idea. But and generally, let's generally talk about what a chronoarchaeologist is and how you came up with that and why it would be cool to have that. What would be the point of that, and what made you think of it?
So I don't think it will be surprising that there are certain parallels with Indiana Jones, and it struck me as a story idea that being able to go to see history through the lens of a modern character would just be a really engaging way to view that historical setting. And so around that idea, I thought, okay, well, what could be a job that would do that? Well, it would be like an Indiana Jones type figure who is a classically trained archaeologist, but who doesn't really practice archaeology. He's a swashbuckling thief, essentially. And so that was sort of the germ of Rabbit. And then I built this world around him that was structured in such a way that it would make that job possible.
Yes, but going back one more level was that there are things that we think are lost to history, artifacts that we think have been lost. And your idea that someone put them somewhere and someone knows where to find them, that they went back and stashed them for later, is just one of the best ideas I've ever heard. Do you remember the moment that you thought, oh, that's what somebody could do?
Well, actually, I originally conceived the idea probably 25 years ago as a germ for a game, because I thought, well, this will be something that you could do on a recurring basis, because you could give your players a new environment, a new setting, a new object to go after. And I thought, okay, yeah, we know that objects, historical objects, are lost to the historical record at some point. There are a lot of them out there that we know are documented up to a point and then suddenly disappear and we never hear from them again. So the menorah had all of these great possibilities, because the last time we know when it was last done, which was by a tourist visiting Rome, who saw it in essentially a museum where it had been sitting for hundreds of years, and made comments about it and how he thought it was cool, basically. And then a variety of different things occurred in that, say, 80 to 100 years after that, at which point the menorah might have moved, might have gotten lost. So I thought, oh, this is perfect.
So just put you on pause for 1 second to say, yeah, in this book, in Splinter Effect, the menorah is one of the things that he's looking for the quarry, the quest, the treasure that he's on the hunt for. Talk a little bit about that and why you chose that. You were saying this was something that appeared, that was noticed and seen and discussed and recorded, and then suddenly it wasn't there.
Right. So for those who are unfamiliar with the story, the second temple in Jerusalem, which was built by Herod the Builder, was this magnificent, monumental temple, which included not only the spectacular architecture, but a variety of seriously grand objects of art, including a menorah, which was probably human size. It's a giant gold menorah. And it was taken back to Rome when Titus succeeded in his siege of Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. They took all of the treasures back to Rome and went on a triumph through the streets and displayed it. It's actually on the Arch of Titus in Rome. You can still see a picture of it inscribed in stone. And from there, it was just tucked into a temple, really a museum, where spoils of war were kept as trophies and people could go see them. And it stayed there for hundreds of years. And then when the Vandals came and attacked Rome, at that point, then its history gets sketchy. It's unclear whether the Vandals took it. They might have, but there's no record of that. If they took it, they probably took it to Carthage, which is where they went after attacking Rome. So it might have been lost in Carthage, except that Carthage was later attacked by Rome again, and all of the spoils of Carthage were taken to Constantinople. So it might have gone there. Oh, and by the way, it might also have been sent back to Jerusalem by the Romans later.
You have to, you love this because you can see just by what Andrew has just said for the past 30 seconds, that what a wonderfully researched and gorgeously possible thing this is, a treasure hunt of the mind and a treasure hunt in history to say, well, what if it's here? What if somebody went back and got it and moved it, and now somebody knows where it is? I want to welcome more people. Emily is here now, and Robin is here, and Shannon Hansen and Vicki Gregory is here. Sharon Bishop says, Rabbit is a great character name. Let's go for that for a second. Welcome, Sharon. Why did you name him Rabbit? Can you tell that?
Well, I knew I wanted something that was really distinctive. I wanted a name that you'd never mistake for another character. And I went to my local cemetery, and I was wandering through my cemetery reading names on gravestones. And I came upon the name Rabbit O'Leary. And I thought, Rabbit, what a great name. Now, I knew that it was unlikely that he would actually be named Rabbit in this day and age. So I made it his nickname, but I thought it just so perfectly encapsulated him. He's wily. He's always on the run. He's always in danger. And I thought that just wraps up so much about who he is as a person.
And he hops from time to time. You know, he
hops from time to time.
It's just so completely perfect. And I love Rabbit because even though he feels like swashbuckly, you know, you have to picture Harrison Ford. There's no way out of it. He's damaged and he's guilty and he's fearful. You've made him this wonderful character. Jerry says you can learn and be entertained at the same time. Absolutely, Jerry. That is 100% true. And this book is full of that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But talk about Rabbit as a fully formed character. You didn't make him be cartoony Indiana Jones. I mean, I love Indiana Jones, not quite cartoony in a good way, but you made him have some real depth of character and feeling. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I I fundamentally reject the idea that anyone walks around like an action hero in their life. You know, action hero is what you do, not what you feel. And in fact, that's the essence of courage, to keep on plowing through what you know you need to do, even when you're scared or when you have moral quandaries about what you're doing. And so I thought, and I actually, the Indiana Jones reference comes back again, because I thought to myself, okay, here's this fun character, but we only see him from what he does in this very limited range. What would it be like if we actually got a little more interior world of a character like that? And so I built a world for Rabbit in which he is damaged. He also bites the hand that feeds him. He's extremely problematic with his funders.
Yeah, I mean that we're talking about Splinter Effect by Andrew Ludington, just out. If you just joined us, a marvelous time travel story, a wonderful adventure, just a terrific read in every way. But the two things about time travel in this book, and I want to talk about both of them separately. One is the whole idea of that when you write a time travel book, there have to be rules for it, and you have done them perfectly. I want to talk about that first, and second, I want to talk about one of the many things I love about this book is how the fact that there's time travel is not the thing. You know, because everyone accepts that there is time travel. It's the administration of the time travel. You know, now how is it going to work as a bureaucracy? Because that's what would happen in real life. There'd be battle over whether it was a government entity or privatized entity, or who would pay for it, or who would go and who would make the decisions. And it would turn into a bureaucratic mess in real life, which it does gorgeously and realistically in Splinter Effect. So let's talk about the rules first of time travel. How did you come up with those, and what are they? And what is Splinter Effect?
So there are really only, I love this concept. I don't remember who told me this. Someone adjacent to Hollywood told me the idea of one buy sci-fi, which is sci-fi that you only need to buy into one idea for.
Oh, that's great.
To be okay with. You know, anything more and it gets too complex. So that's my idea with Splinter Effect is, yes, it has a sci-fi aspect to it, but you only need to buy into a pretty narrow band to get it, which is really the Splinter Effect itself, which is that when you go back in time, it's assumed if it's in your past, it already happened in your past. So if I went back in time today, I was already there. I'm not inventing anything new. I just haven't done it yet. So, but if you change anything too much, it will cause a splinter. And you have now created effectively an alternate universe in which those actions could have taken place. So Rabbit is very careful. He's very careful to never change anything that he knows happened in his own past. The joke that one character makes is, that's why I never tried to kill Hitler. Because you know that didn't happen in your past. And if you do it, it's going to create a splinter. And that isn't your past anymore. It's somebody else's past.
And are the splinters known? In the splinter, I guess they're known.
In the splinter, they're known. So if I went back and I created a splinter and I didn't come back to the present, I would continue to live in that splinter. If I come back to my own reality from which I left.
Did you make a big chart about this? How did you keep like the 10 commandments of time travel? How did you make those rules, and how much fun or difficult was it, or how carefully did you have to tread through your book to make sure that everything works? Because everything works. I mean, it's really very carefully plotted.
Thank you. Yes, it is complex. And I will say, as a teaser, since this is going to be a 4-book series, it gets a lot harder in subsequent books.
Oh.
Because the story's evolving, it gets more complex. There are more layers upon that. It gets harder as it goes forward. But yes, it was challenging. And I did get to the end of the book and realize, I've created a problem for myself that I then had to go back and figure out and make sure it was airtight. So,
I love that, though. That's part of the fun of writing, isn't it? That you write something and then your brain says, wait a minute, go back to chapter 3 and tweak that. And you can just feel it ratchet into place, that your book says, okay, that was it. And there's a wonderful scene where Rabbit is talking with another scientist, and they're describing how it all works. And you handle that so gorgeously, because we as readers have exactly the same questions. So you have people in the book ask the questions of the scientists to get the answers very straightforwardly and quickly. So we know the rules, but we also know that they know that there are things that they don't know. And that's cool too.
Right. And that I'm happy to say that most of the things that they don't know, I do know.
Oh, that's interesting. So that way you can use those later.
Yes,
you can use those throughout. I mean, then when you take the rule, so let me tell you very, very quickly, speaking about the one by, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, one by sci-fi.
Did you ever see, did any of you, when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, did any of you ever see the movie Thank You for Smoking? It's the pseudo documentary, Thank You for Smoking.
I've never seen it.
Oh my gosh, you must. And it's about two PR people for a tobacco company who are trying to convince people to smoke. It's all about public relations for smoking. So they go to Hollywood and they're talking to a film director, and they want him to have the astronauts smoke in their spaceship. So the producer says, you can't have the astronauts smoke in the spaceship. The whole thing would blow up. It would be terrible. And the PR guy says, don't you have writers? Just have one of the astronauts light up and say, good thing we solved that oxygen problem. And then just go on, so isn't that great? So you have a problem and you just say, that's not a problem because we solved it. And the reader, the viewer, will buy that. And that's what you've done so gorgeously here. We never question that time travel works. What is funny, though, is the money and the competition, and that there's not just Rabbit as a time traveler. Can you talk about how it becomes commerce and how it becomes adversarial, and why that's such a part of the story?
Sure. So I worked in sponsored research for many years. And sponsored research is all about principal investigators trying to come up with compelling ideas and get money for them so that they can run their projects. It's a world that I'm very familiar with. I'm familiar with government funding and how that works and what the rules are. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to need to have some kind of a bureaucratic underpinning. So, okay, I developed the idea that the time machines are allowable. They're licensed. There are only a few licenses per country. To create a time machine and to run the infrastructure will be funded by the federal government, but missions won't be, at least not in the United States. The United States government will not fund missions for time travel because they're very expensive to run.
Yes.
And so you have to go to outside funding sources, private sponsors, to fund your missions. And you know that, very wealthy people are not going to fund basic research. They never do. So what they will fund is an object to come back that can go into a museum, and it can say sponsored by the X Foundation, and they can have their name associated with it. And so Rabbit and others in his world rely very heavily on the relationships with wealthy funders to fund one-off missions for particularly attractive objects that they can get.
And so that means there's competition for these things. And that also means there's some skullduggery to get these things. Talk a little bit about that and how you came up with that.
Right. So that is, and the skullduggery can be state sanctioned, although it shouldn't be by the rules because they are supposed to all register their missions and not compete for the same objects with other countries who have official licenses. But of course, if you can do it, somebody's going to do it illegally. So there are, his adversary works for a criminal organization that runs its own time travel operation, and they clearly have their own funding sources, and they're not relying on sponsorship. So he has to now compete for the menorah with the person who has just robbed him twice. And she is coming back to try to get the menorah before he does.
And tell us a little bit about her. Andrew is asking as well.
So Helen is her name, and she is every bit as wily, if not more wily, than Rabbit. She is tough. She is very, very resourceful, very manipulative, but at the same time, she's weirdly much more lighthearted than Rabbit, and in a lot of ways more mature than Rabbit and wiser than Rabbit. And so their relationship over the course of this adversarial hunt for the menorah evolves in some interesting ways as they need to shift the tone of that relationship as they try to get it. She's one of my favorite characters in the book.
Yeah, me too, and Andrew too. Andrew Ball is here as well, and he is a fan. And we are talking about Splinter Effect by Andrew Ludington. I have 3 more questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And one of them is you were talking about how you knew things that the people in the book didn't know, but the people in the book know things that the other fictional characters, when they time travel, don't know. Your characters know what's going to happen in history, essentially, as much as they can know when they go back, and they have to be careful about parceling out what they know so that they can use it to their advantage, but not be suspicious about it. Can you talk a little bit about how that must have been so much fun to write?
Oh, it really is. That's where the sort of spy novel aspect of it comes in. And again, another little angle of genre that comes into the book is that, Rabbit sometimes is operating in a very, very clandestine way. So he is he's meeting people, and he has to come up with covers. Who am I today? Who am I going to convince this person I am, in order that they will help me get my objective? So he works his way into seeing the Emperor of Rome at one point, and has to make sure that he doesn't say anything too suspicious or look or raise too much attention to himself. And he has a whole host of tools that he uses to either get attention or deflect attention from himself. And that comes up at various points too.
I mean, it's so much fun to watch him use his information and use his skills. And the skill, I mean, you've set up this whole system where there are costumes and language and coins and weapons. And it feels, I mean, not that I know, but it feels very realistic and authentic to me. How immersive your research must have been, not only to come up with the settings, but all the accoutrements of the time.
It certainly it was, and happily, 6th century Constantinople is happily and unhappily. 6th century Constantinople is not as well documented as other periods of the Roman Empire. So there are a few primary sources, but not too many. If you were looking at, the era of Augustus, there are a lot of primary sources. There are letters between senators. There are all kinds of primary sources you can read. Not too many from 6th century Constantinople, but there's a lot of people who've written about the period. So I read all the primary sources, got as much as I could. And then I started going out and going after all of these hypotheses that had been developed by historians about the era. And my favorite bit of research is I wanted Rabbit to sit in a particular spot in the Hippodrome in one scene. And I thought, it'd be really great is if the Jewish section happened to be near the section of these particular racing fans. That would be really handy. And I was reading through an article, and I found in the appendix, I found a reference to an article by a Finnish professor, and I couldn't find the article. So I managed to track him down, wrote him an email, and said, "Do you happen to have a copy of this article in English?" And he wrote back to me within an hour and said, "I'm on holiday right now, but I'll get back to you in 3 days." And he sent me the article.
And did it prove about your seating in the Hippodrome?
It did.
That's amazing.
It turned out the Jewish section was right in the middle of the section of what they called the blues, the racing fans who were the blues.
Maybe you had actually been there before.
I think it's possible.
Do you ever imagine that? I mean, does your imagination go there that you're making up a story? We're talking about the splinter effect, and I'm now going way off into another topic, but that maybe we talk about deja vu. We talk about you look familiar. We talk about this place feels familiar to me. And all those kinds of things are what make us sort of believe in time travel, because there are parts of our lives that are kind of impossible to explain.
I mean, I will say that when I get into the thinking through a scene, how it's going to work, when I'm drafting it for the first time, I lose track of the words, I lose track of the page, I lose track of this office, and I really feel like I'm in the location. I can see it, I can smell it. It's a very immersive process. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you get that reading your book as well. You do take us there. It is incredibly cinematic, and in every sense, it's cinematic. We know how Rabbit feels. We know how the atmosphere is. We know what he sees. We know his psychology. It's really quite a tour de force. I mean, it's a really fun book to read. But I'm so impressed by how much you respect your readers, that you know that they're going to want to know all this cool stuff, that you've mixed gorgeous research. I mean, I know a lot more about 6th century Constantinople now than I did before, which was, I think, 0, but I believe the whole thing. Is that fun for you when people say, "Wow, I just will never look at the world the same way"?
Oh yeah. Two of my favorite compliments about the book. Now I have 3. But someone told, one of my beta readers wrote to me and said, "I feel like I just got back from a trip to 6th century Constantinople."
That's great.
Which I just thought was incredibly rewarding.
I just
And
get goosebumps at that.
yeah. And then at the launch party last week, the wonderful Susanna Calkins did the Q&A with me, and she's a PhD historian of medieval history. And she said, she said, it's not often that somebody who is not really a historian gets it this right. I thought, ooh, that felt good.
It's fantastic. It's fun and it's wise and it's smart and it's imaginative and it is completely immersive. On the back it says Indiana Jones meets Outlander. I mean, you cannot go wrong with that. That has history and that has passion and that has intention and that has entertainment and that is absolutely irresistible. And it's a series. So what comes next? Not that we don't want you to focus on this, you all. This is out right now. Click, click, click. You know what to do. Run, 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 and take yourself to 6th century Constantinople via your favorite bookstore. But what comes next?
Well, so Double Shadow is book 2 in the series. It comes out March 17th, 2026. So it is ready to go. I don't want to give too much away.
I mean, Double Shadow sounds like there's 2 suns.
Like 2 suns?
2 suns that make a double shadow. Just it's different. It's a different. So it comes out on St. Patrick's Day.
Comes out on St. Patrick's Day. Takes place, while this book takes place primarily in Constantinople in the 6th century, book 2 takes place primarily in Jerusalem in the 1st century. Although it hops around in time a little bit more. It has a very, I think, a very exciting plot, and it really deepens the relationship between Rabbit and Helen.
Wonderful. I mean, it just sounds great, and your whole life has changed because of this. What do you think about that? That you're now an author? I mean, a lauded, revered, applauded author. What do you think about that?
Wow. I have to think about this fresh right now. Nobody's said that to me. So, yeah, it feels great.
Yeah.
It feels great. I love telling stories, and I get the wonderful privilege of coming down here every morning in the early AM to write a little bit. And it's the best part of my working day. And to know that people are, it's going to be translated into Arabic. When I think there be people in Saudi Arabia who read this book in their native script, I'm like, that's amazing.
That is amazing, especially for a book like this, because it is kind of time travel. That's a whole nother culture of people with whole different brains and attitudes. Mm-hmm. In a different place in the universe, that your book can time travel simply to them by changing how the little letters look. That's fantastic. And now I am yammering because it's time to go. This is great. Congratulations, Andrew, on Splinter.
Thank you.
We have a million questions. Deborah Press says, wow, that is so amazing. And Emily says that title, Double Shadows, is intriguing. It definitely is. So Karen, our producer, what questions do we have from our wonderful viewers? And I forgot to tell you there's a giveaway. So all of you who have left a question or a comment are entered to have the wheel of fun be spun for you. I should have said that like half an hour ago, but you guys know. All right. And Renee says, oh, would you travel back or forward, and for what purpose? Asks Renee.
That's a great question. And one of the things that this comes up between the characters in book 2. And several of the characters respond that they would try to go back and change something in their past if they could do so. And I will say, I don't believe in that. I like all of you, I have things in my past that I don't like the memories of all that much. But without them, I wouldn't be sitting here, the person I am. So I'll keep all of those events and memories the way they are. So if I were to travel, I probably would travel into the past. And it probably would be for kind of the purposes that, not necessarily for stealing, that probably wouldn't be on my top list, but time travel tourism sounds amazing. I would love to go back and see some of these places that fascinate me.
But you'd have to make sure that you can't get sick. You can always come home. You can choose where you get to return. You can leave from wherever you are. I mean, I would make a whole lot of rules, make sure that I get back to where there's, antibiotics.
That is true. And that's actually maybe a little bit of the rules that we should discuss, Hank, is that that we didn't talk about in our previous questions, is that you enter the past in a particular place. And if you don't return to that place within the allotted time period, when your time travel, they call decays, so your trip decays, if you're in that spot, you return to the present. If you're not in that spot, you don't return to the present. And you can be trapped there.
You're so fun, Andrew. But of course you have to do that. Of course you have to do that in a book, because there has to be the ticking clock of the return to the spot. In my time travel, you can just go from wherever you want.
Yours sounds much more forgiving.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. It's much, much safer. So Andrew says, thoughts on the audiobook? Were you included in the audition process for the narrator?
Oh, great question. I was included in the audition process, and I actually I approached the audiobook director and said, I might be interested in reading it myself. And they were very open to that and said, sure, here are 2 pages, submit an audition. So I read 2 pages. They picked out the hardest pages. I read these. And who wrote this? Like, it was the 2 pages that included the longest Greek words in the entire book. But I read it, turned it back in, and then they sent me their 3 favorite picks for the audiobook and said, you choose between yourself and one of these folks. And so I did get to make the final vote on the narrator, which I'm very honored to be able to do. I did not choose myself. And I think that Roger Wayne did a great job.
It's so marvelous to have a good audiobook reader. I did my acknowledgments in the book. So
okay.
Maybe the next time, if you want to be in the audiobook, I thought, I'm not reading the whole book, but the acknowledgments should come from me. So maybe if you have author's notes or acknowledgments, you can make a deal to do that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would work. We have time for one more question. Vicky says, any discussion of movie or series option?
Discussions, yes. Do have discussions. My Hollywood agent has taken it out and shown it to a few different producers. I think a lot of that's going to hinge on how successful the book is, honestly, because it's expensive. This is going to be an expensive book to make.
I was going to say that going back to 6th century Constantinople is going to require.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, Vicky and everyone, I think that, the movie in your mind will be wonderful of this. This will unspool in your imagination and you'll be able to see it. If somebody 5 years from now makes it into a series or movie, that would be great. But this was meant to be a book and it succeeds brilliantly as a book. You just can't think about it. Andrew, it's one of those things that is pie in the sky, possibly someday, but you're going to write Double Shadow. And is it all plotted out, or are your other books all plotted out, or is it going to be, you're just going to see?
Yeah, no, Double Shadow's done. It's already edited. I just got the cover the other day. Very exciting. I am about 3/4 of the way through book 3, and book 4 is all plotted out.
Fantastic. Well, we cannot wait. Vicky, when the movie comes, I'm looking at the comments when I look over here. When the movie comes out, you and I will go together. That'll be our movie date. Perfect. Meanwhile, you all look for Splinter Effect by Andrew Ludington, and one of you will win a copy when we spin the Wheel of Fun right now to see who is going to win, a lucky winner of the Splinter Effect. I'm mesmerized by the spinning names here. And the winner is Sherry Raybach. That is so great. Sherry is just a veteran of Crime Time. And we are so pleased, Sherry, that you have won, you lucky woman, a copy of Splinter Effect. So you know what to do. You email me. I will email our producer. Our producer will email Andrew's publicist, and they will email Andrew. And then Andrew will sign the book and send it to the publicist. And then the publicist will send it to you. And it will all work out nicely because that's how it all works. Andrew, congratulations again. Thank you for being here today and talking about Splinter Effect.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
I loved it. I absolutely loved the book. Now, all of you who are out there, do not move. You have 15 minutes to go get a lemonade or a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever you want, because in 15 minutes, you're going to be back here, right, for the second edition of Crime Time Today, where we talk to Matthew Sullivan about Midnight in Soap Lake. This is Imagination Day on Crime Time. This is original, unique, quirky, gorgeous, wonderful books. And Splinter Effect is one. Midnight in Soap Lake is another. On the back, it says, "Welcome to Soap Lake, a town to rival Twin Peaks and Stephen King's Castle Rock." So you do not want to miss the incredibly imaginative Midnight in Soap Lake. Shannon Hansen says, excited to read it. Vicki Gregory says, congratulations on your debut. We are talking about Splinter Effect from the fabulous Minotaur books by Andrew Ludington. You all, thank you so much for coming. Andrew, safe travels. Happy book tour. And I hope you'll come back next year for your next book.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right, terrific, you all. We will see Andrew next year, and we will see you all in about 15 minutes. And remember, until then, it is always safe inside a book.